long time no see. So this next piece is called This Earth, and it's a setting, not my own words this time, really superior ones by Dante. This is a moment from the beginning of Dante's Purgatory, when they've just emerged out of hell and they're breathing our planet's air for the first time again. That's one of my favorite aspects of Purgatory, is that it doesn't take place in some imaginary place, it actually happens on Earth. And so there's something very beautiful about it. For me, it's the most human part. This is a moment when Dante's guide, Virgil, cleans him of the soot and the stains of hell, and it's a curiously erotic moment. He's rendered all uncovered, tutto discoverto, in order to be ready to continue his journey. Please welcome Anthony Roth Costanzo. So the next piece on the program is a selection from my opera Crossing. Davóne Tines, who will be singing the remainder of the program, actually, was the person for whom I wrote not just this scene, but also the songs. Both the scene from Crossing and the Whitman songs are part of the Crossing project, which is a kind of fantasia on the life of Walt Whitman. The songs were written first as studies to see if I could make anything musically of this poetry that has so much music stuffed into it already. Davóne and I first sang them in a different arrangement as early as 2012, and the opera didn't go up till last year, so we've been living with this material for a long time. And the scene, which you're about to hear, is a moment when a character named Freddie Stowers, who is an escaped slave who is now fighting for the Union Army in the Civil War, tells Whitman, who is, as he actually did, volunteering for years in the hospitals outside of Washington, D.C. He tells him about a strange vision that he had running north, which in the opera actually prompts Whitman's poem Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. I liked the idea that Whitman was not just getting inspiration in a vacuum, but actually drawing on the extraordinary experiences of the people he was helping out. So please welcome Davóne Tines.
something wanted in North that I don't understand. I had lost all hope. I was starving alone. I almost wanted to go back home. I stood aboard a ferry, crossing at night. The mist was thick, there was no light. Then over the river, the air caught fire. I saw machines that flew through the sky. I heard explosions that shook the ground, and towers I saw that pierced the clouds. Life and death, destruction and birth. For an instant I saw mankind's future on earth. In this life I'll never see such things again. But one day they will be. I don't know when. The night time just stopped, or time came all at once. It gave me all I need. I've been strong. I've been strong ever since.
The last selection doesn't really need an introduction. These are the Whitman studies that inspired that opera.
The newborn emerging as my hands soothingly to and fro, a few inches from them, are restless sink in their beds. They fitfully sleep. The earth recedes from me into the night. I saw that it was beautiful, and I see that what is not the earth is beautiful. Flood tide below me, I see you face to face. And you that shall cross from shore to shore years hence, you others who are to follow me, I see now the ties between me and you. The current rushing so swiftly, swimming with me far away, you others, you are more to me than you might suppose. Just as you feel when you look on the river, so I felt. It was the same to me as it is to you. What is it then between us? What is the count of the scores or hundreds of years between us? What whatever it is, it avails not. Flow on, river, flow with the flood tide, and ebb with the ebb tide. Gorgeous clouds of the sunset, we receive you with free sense at last. This is thy hour, O soul, thy free flight into the wordless. Away from books, away from art, the day erased, the lesson done. Live to live forth, emerging silent, gazing, pondering the themes thou lovest best. Night, sleep, death, and the stars.
Well, that certainly is no easy piano accompaniment. Matthew, can we have you back for just this extraordinary, absolutely amazing. Please have a seat. I was just joking that when you have a piano accompaniment, you really do it. It's just not the amateur piano accompaniment that one might hope for.
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't consider myself a capital P pianist these days, so I think when I do play, I just pretend that I'm an orchestra. Because I'm thinking of all the parts that, I can't quite get that flute part, so I guess I'll rumble over here.
And I was wondering a little bit about that because the crossing is orchestrated.
Oh, yes.
But the songs are not?
Those songs can be played in that form. The middle one, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, actually does appear in the opera as well.
Okay, because there was a similarity in the piano accompaniment in both the crossing and the songs, and I was...
Yeah, they're cut from the same cloth, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, in a world that seems to be ever more specialized, you continue to express yourself in so many different ways, and as a poet and essayist, as a pianist, as a conductor, as a composer and librettist. Do all of these feed one another, or in your creative spirit, or do they exist somehow separately?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say that I tend to all the fires equally. I think that would just, make me a dilettante. The same way I wouldn't say I'm a capital P pianist, I wouldn't say I'm a capital P poet either. I've really tried to focus on composing, and also on conducting. So they do all feed each other. I think I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I hadn't nourished these activities in a lot of different ways. But these days I'm actually focusing more on focus, and that is on composing music.
When you are composing, do you, and you feel an essay in you, there's something you want to say in the written word, do you say, okay, when I'm done composing this opera, I'll do some writing? Or can you put one down, pick one up? How does it work?
Well, it changes, I think. It's felt anyway, like it's changed for me over the past few years. I think, when I was in college, it really was tending to multiple fires. And I think that was productive, but if I'd kept doing that, I would have lost my mind. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the truth is right now I do have a lot of things that I want to write that are made of words, but they are all on a shelf somewhere, and I'm not sure when I'll have time for them.
And how about the intersection of instrumental music and opera composition? Because so many of the composers who are creating works for the opera stage today don't also do concerti or ensemble writing. So do you think of yourself first as an opera composer or an instrumental composer?
No, I just think of myself as a composer. For me, the two are really the same activity. I mean, I have a particular affinity for opera because I feel comfortable with language. But, gosh, this is really the wrong building to say that in, but I think as a composer, when someone says to you, "You write well for the voice," it can feel a bit like an insult.
Say more about that.
Because it can sometimes imply you don't write well for the violin. Huh. And I think for most composers today, the risk is that you don't write well for the voice. For me, it was the opposite. I always felt very comfortable writing for the voice, and I wanted to be sure that that it was a complete picture.
Was there a way, and following that up, because in a lot of new work, the composers aren't adept at writing for the voice. They don't know how the instrument functions. How did you come to write well for the voice?
I'm not sure if I do, first of all, but from early on, I was equally interested in fiction, poetry, music. As recently as a few years ago, I was really not sure which direction my life would take. And if you are immersed in both fields at one point simultaneously, you begin to see how interlinked they are. That is, that we're not always aware that language is a musical communication, but of course it is. I'm using words that have specific meanings, but really I'm communicating to you through the pace and the tone of voice and a million things. You know, language is like 90% music. Maybe that's just my particular kind of synesthesia. But I think that's what, and you need to understand, if you're going to write well for the voice, that vowels, consonants, those are the stops. You know, like the buttons on a flute. Those are the things through which the music pours. And it's physical. Language is not an abstract thing. It's every bit as physical as sound is. And so I think if you're not familiar with that and it does feel abstract to you, you're always going to kind of approach it at a distance. Whereas if you treat language as the instrument, then you're writing from within the way a singer has to communicate.
The texts you've treated are so varied. We have Orpheus, the great myth. You have Dante, Whitman.
James Merrill.
James Merrill, exactly, coming up. So what about a text, when it's not your own words, what about either a story or a text speaks to you and says, this is what I want to treat?
You know, I would never have dared to set Whitman if I were not writing a piece about his life, because I think his poetry is an example of what I'm not looking for, which is that the lines are endlessly long. They literally spill over the margins of the page sometimes. You can barely get through one of them on one breath if you're speaking them, you know, never mind if you're singing them. So it's actually kind of psychotic that I spent 3 years working with Whitman's words, because they're the least fit. So I guess to answer your question, what I normally look for is a kind of incompleteness, the sense that the language is sort of longing to be filled by a little bit, by something more. I've also done a lot with the poetry of Paul Celan, whose words are incredibly spare and incredibly concentrated. They make you aware that the word is just one tiny blip in this vast field of silence. And that to me feels like an extremely fruitful situation, because it implies the whole space that the words exist in. The same goes for some Merrill, actually. The more condensed Merrill poems have this kind of, it's so contained. There's so much that does not get said, whereas Whitman grabs you and says it all. I think that sense of, you know, that's what made the Stravinsky-Auden pairing so wonderful, is that Auden's text is it looks so simple and so condensed, and then Stravinsky just cracks it open.
When you write your own libretti, do you try to leave room for the music in your words?
Totally. It feels like a very different task from writing a poem. If people ask me now, oh, are you writing any poems? My answer is always nope, even if I am writing something to be set to music, because it feels like it's part of the musical process. Really, it's just laying the groundwork. In a way, if it worked completely as a text, I would probably have done something wrong, and the music would be superfluous.
There was a wonderful annual conference in 2007, and Toni Morrison was our keynote speaker.
Really?
And she had just written the libretto for Margaret Garner of Richard Danielpour. And she read some of her poetry to demonstrate what she felt was its opacity. And then she read some of the libretto to show how she had left room for music. And it was just wonderful to hear her talk about that. You work as a conductor, a composer, and a librettist, and I'm reminded in this week of Tristan at the Met that Wagner was a conductor, composer, and librettist. Talk about the conducting. Is this a way to study scores? What does conducting bring to this creative matrix?
You know, Mark, I come out of the jazz and rock world, believe it or not, which means that I come out of a tradition in which writing the music and performing it are the same activity. If you had a jazz musician or a rock musician who said, oh, well, I write the songs, but I wouldn't I wouldn't perform. That would be weird. And it would be super weird. And it would also be weird for a rock band to only play other people's music. You know, a cover band is something that is frowned upon. And you know, let's face it, orchestras, opera houses, we're cover bands. That's all we do a lot of the time. So it's not so much that I turned to conducting later in order to fill some other gap. It's just that writing and performing always felt like a big process to me, and I feel like if I didn't conduct it, I'd be denying myself the catharsis.
And your repertoire is fairly varied as a conductor. Of course, you do new work, but you have, I guess, coming up Figaro in Bari.
That was last season.
It was last season at Petrocelli, which I just had the pleasure of seeing this past summer. The Bartered Bride at Music Academy of the West. Gino Nyegan at Juilliard. So you're exploring also some of the core rep, and do you think about the core rep as you compose new pieces? Or do you immerse yourself in some of the traditions?
Oh yeah, no, it's not like I'm just doing this now. That's been mother's milk to me. I mean, Figaro, Bride, Onegin. Look, I didn't expect to be sitting here with you a couple of years ago. You know, I figured that if I were going to make a living as a musician, I would have to do it through performing. The idea of relying on composition is crazy. It's stupid. And you know, the idea of risking it all to be a conductor is pretty crazy as well, but there is a path. And so for a while, I kind of figured that conducting would be the day job or coaching or whatever. So it's actually only recently that I've distanced myself a bit from the standard rep, in the sense that I don't, how to put it, I don't treat it as part of the necessary daily routine to make sure that I've got this part of Rigoletto memorized. But it totally informs what I do. It's funny, I identify with, sort of personally identify with so many different composers that don't sound anything like me. I mean, it's like Messiaen to Verdi. You can just learn so much from Verdi, even if you don't share his harmonic language at all, just about economy, about just, there is just never a wasted gesture. I don't need to tell you that. Yeah, I turn to it for things that I can steal and then promptly cover up so no one would ever know.
How did you approach the children's opera at Lyric Opera Chicago? It is so hard to write for children.
It's tough, though. I mean, they are much less likely to complain that it doesn't sound like Puccini. No, they don't have a frame of reference necessarily.
Right.
And so that felt kind of liberating. To be honest, what it meant for me was really practical. It was like, okay, there will not be Calixto Bieto style sex scenes, and there won't be extreme violence, but otherwise, you know, a lot of operas speak to the child in us rather than the adult, I think. They ask us to surrender a whole lot of the crust layers of consciousness, and they really want to get to the magma, at least, or the core, which is something that's much more primal and that I think is there from childhood. So I approached it, I wanted to write a kind of futuristic fairy tale. I wanted to take a familiar story and set it in a future world. For me, the big story in the world right now should be climate change, because it's the only thing that's happening that could change our conception of what our relationship with nature is. Nature's always been the thing that doesn't change, and then suddenly maybe we heard it. We didn't think we had that power, but we are. So that's a huge evolution for humans to deal with, and it's happening so fast. So I kind of wanted to treat it almost like a biblical parable, and so the piece is set in it's set in a dystopian future world in which climate change has gotten so bad that the few humans who remain have retreated into what was once a zoo, and kind of said to the animals, "Let us in. We'll build a wall, and not let any of the forces outside get to us." And they sort of try to forget how bad they screwed things up out there. And the opera follows two kids who were born into this world and who are given. There's a monkey who lives next door from when it was still a zoo, and the monkey has been illegally growing a fruit tree and offers them the apple, which they eat. And unlike in the Garden of Eden, they realize that they have to, well, like in the Garden of Eden, they realize they have to leave. But unlike in the Garden of Eden, the outside world is actually what's worth saving rather than the punishment.
Right.
So it's this bizarre mixture of parable and sci-fi and what have you. I had a great time writing it, and it's also for smaller forces, which just takes less time, and that was appealing as well.
And I don't know it. I need to hear the work. I don't know it. You're taking up the position of composer in residence at the LA Opera, and I see that you'll be conducting a couple of pieces. A couple of those pieces will be yours. One is a commission for 2018 or 2019.
19, yeah.
Do you have an image of how you would like to bring your creativity into the heart of the opera company, not just that on certain nights you conduct? Do you have thoughts about how to integrate your creativity into the work of the day-to-day operation?
I do. My role in LA as artist in residence will, I think, be equal parts bringing new music into the bloodstream, and also taking beloved existing music, starting with Philip Glass's Akhenaten next month, starring Anthony actually in the title role, and seeing how we can bring these aspects of opera together, and also how we can reach more of Los Angeles doing it. I'm very excited to be performing with the young artists and with other members of the company all over the city, not just at the Chandler. So I see my role as a bridge builder and somewhat as a disruptor, but I hope in a benign way. I think that ultimately we need to change the proportions of the new versus standard rep to get to a very practical matter. As you said, I love the standard repertory and feel that it has so much to offer us, but if it takes up 98% of the space and the pressure on every new piece is that it must be a masterpiece, and it's like when a young artist has a gallery opening, there is not a Rembrandt hanging next to the new piece. It's totally psychotic. I would want, I think, ultimately something like a 50-50 ratio, because I think if you do it 50-50 with a company that does does a substantial number of productions, you can still have variety within the standard rep, because the standard rep is not just one thing. It's Lulu and it's Popea. You can have variety, but you can also have variety within the new work. And that to me is important, because very often if it's just one piece, 80% of the audience thinks, oh, I guess that's what's going on. And the reality is there's too much going on to even get a sense of it with any one piece, no matter how great it is. So I would hope for an equivalent variety between what's pre-existing and what's new. And I think it'll take a long time for any company to get there, but I think I'm coming to put my thumb on the scale.
Well, don't shortchange it. There are a couple of companies looking at some season brochures for this coming season, and there are a couple of established companies where it's 50-50. So
really,
yeah, absolutely. So your dream will come true sooner than you think, and I think we'll all be better off for it. You have received a great deal of acclaim. You have been covered in the media. You have commissions from extraordinary companies. Is the public attention a pressure that you ignore, that bears on you? How do you manage that?
I try to ignore it because it's not useful in the solitary moment of composition. But also, I mean, it's not like being a pop star. It's not, you know, it's quite an abstract thing. I'm living a quite normal life from a lot of perspectives. So yes, I try to ignore it.
I think probably a healthy thing there. These talks are sometimes, you know, I try to aim them a little bit also for professional development purposes so that young people watching these interviews can understand how careers develop. And I said it back in the control room that I have been president of Opera America as long as Matthew has been alive, and which was a sobering thought. And you know, you are relatively young compared to others to have some of the great commissions, great positions that you have. How did you start it? You went to college, you went to Juilliard. How did you begin so that your career has blossomed as it has?
It was really not calculated, at least not the nature of recent developments. But when I look at the past few years, I do notice one essential thing, which is that I have written music for colleagues that I know and with whom I have worked as a performer. And I'm not trying to say that every composer has to be, you know, Vladimir Horowitz. I'm certainly not. But I think that things develop organically if you're in the trenches with your colleagues, making the music physically. I mean, I think about the way that my work at Lyric and at the ART in Boston, the artists that sang in those shows, you know, I met Renee Fleming, who ultimately, essentially led to her support led to the commission of Second Nature. I met her when I played for a masterclass of hers at Harvard when I was a sophomore, and then she ultimately saw me conduct Figaro and conduct an original piece. Now that is a broad view, and I think she got a sense of who I was as a person and who I was as an artist in a way that was fuller than if I had just been sending out scores. You know, similarly, the piece I'll be writing for the Met, would it have happened the precisely same way if I wasn't an assistant conductor there? I don't know. It was awful convenient that I was waving my arms in the basement and that I was learning from Thomas Adès, of all people, the most extraordinary performer, composer example I could think of. So I guess it comes down to make music with colleagues that you, and friends, that you trust and are excited by, and things tend to grow out of that.
It also helps to be really brilliant and talented. I know that Laura Lee will be standing back there saying, Mark, don't, you know, close it, don't run on longer than we're supposed to. We are so honored to kick off our season with you. We wish you the very, very best of luck in Los Angeles and with all of your commissions upcoming. It's just fantastic. There is a casual reception in the lobby, ladies and gentlemen, so please join me in thanking Matthew Aucoin and join us at the back for a reception.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.